New developments in the deadliest air disaster in South Korean history that left 179 people dead. The questions surrounding the explosive plane crash in South Korea as the U.S. now gets involved in the investigation.
Today was one of the hottest December days on record in Austin, but this front is going to make a whole lot of difference by tomorrow. We'll show you the temperature drop in first warning weather.
The nation and the world at large mourning the longest living U.S. president. The tributes pouring in from across the globe to honor former President Jimmy Carter and his lasting legacy.
And looking at some of those tributes, flags in London were lowered to half-staff today to honor the former president. You can see the Union Jacks above 10 and 11 Downing Street, the residences of the British Prime Minister and the UK's Chancellor, respectively.
And back here in the U.S., action on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange paused for 1 minute this morning in honor of the former president. A single bell tolled to mark the start of the moment of silence as photos of Carter were displayed on monitors. Former President Carter died yesterday, surrounded by his family at his Georgia home at the age of 100. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Jennifer Sanders.
And I'm Daniel Marin. NBC's Susan McGinnis reports on Carter's legacy and the honors, tributes, and ceremonies for him.
A century of life, decades of service.
One of the greatest men of peace, but also one of the greatest friends to the world.
America's 39th president died Sunday at his home in Plains, Georgia, surrounded by family. Memorials growing larger, tributes and honors pouring in from former presidents and leaders around the world. Moments of silence at Sunday's Washington Commanders game and at today's opening bell.
Jimmy Carter stands as a model of what it means to live a life of meaning and purpose.
Starting out on his family's peanut farm, he later served in the military, then made the move into politics, becoming a Georgia state senator and governor. And in 1976, a run for the White House.
My name is Jimmy Carter, and I'm running for president.
As president, he called on Americans to make sacrifices.
There's no way that I or anyone else in the government can solve our energy problems if you are not willing to help.
But after a struggling economy and Ronald Reagan made Carter a one-term president, he returned to Plains to live a modest post-presidency with the love of his life, Rosalind, who he lost just more than a year ago. It was Carter's life after the White House many find most notable, building homes for Habitat for Humanity, fighting for human rights, which earned him the Nobel Peace Prize.
Peace and human rights and treating everybody the same has been what I hope will be my legacy.
He was a great humanitarian. He set the example for all of us, and we're going to miss him.
The nation preparing its final goodbyes for a beloved son of Georgia. In Washington, Susan McGinnis, NBC News.
And going in depth right now, President Carter traveled to Austin several times over the years in support of the Lyndon B. Johnson Presidential Library. Archival photos captured Carter's 1981 two-day visit to Austin, where he took part in a library tour. And the Carters also visited Austin in 2007 to attend funeral services for former First Lady Claudia Alta Lady Bird Johnson. And Carter also stopped in Austin in 2014 to speak at the LBJ Presidential Library's Civil Rights Summit, which commemorated the 50th anniversary of the passing of the Civil Rights Act.
Well, 2 adults and 2 children are in the hospital this afternoon after a fire broke out at a fourplex in North Austin. It happened shortly after noon along Hardin Court, that's near North Lamar and Runberg Lane. EMS took 4 people to the hospital for smoke inhalation. In total, the fire left 9 people without a place to stay. The Red Cross of Central Texas and Austin Police Victim Services are assisting them. The fire department says the fire left $200,000 worth of structural damage and $50,000 in content damage. No word yet on a cause.
First warning weather with Chief Meteorologist Nick Bannon.
Wow, we easily broke the previous high temperature record for this date in Austin history. Previous record of 83 on this day in 1951. And we got to 89 degrees, making it one of the hottest December days ever in Austin area history. You can see we're still very warm now. 86 in Austin, still some middle and lower 80s, even Dripping Springs in the upper 80s at this hour. It's going to set us up for still a warm evening. And of course, with the high heat, low humidity and gusty winds, much higher fire danger for the hill country where the air is the driest and the winds are the strongest. That's where red flag warnings are in effect until 6 o'clock. Of course, that it basically means that there's an incredibly high fire danger. That's where the winds are the strongest, 10 to 20 mile per hour sustained winds, but getting gusts a little higher than that. And you can see single-digit relative humidities west of 35 in the hill country. But wherever you are, you've got to be very careful with any open flame here this evening, overnight, and into the day tomorrow, even as that red flag warning expires. Coming up in First Warning Weather, we'll track an overnight cold front and the big temperature drop it's going to mean for tomorrow before a slow but steady warm-up.
All right, Nick, thank you very much. We're learning more about this weekend's deadly plane crash in South Korea that killed 179 people. This is now the worst air-related disaster on Korean soil. Investigators have recovered both black boxes from the aircraft, which they are now going to use to get to the bottom of what prompted the plane to make an emergency landing without its landing gear. Some blame a bird strike, while others blame bad weather. Meanwhile, the National Transportation Safety Board is leading a team of American investigators to help South Korean authorities determine the cause of the crash. And this disaster marks another major setback for Boeing, closing out a tumultuous year for the company, marked by safety issues, federal probes, plunging stock prices, and a worker strike. For decades, Boeing has maintained a role as one of the giants of American manufacturing, but this past year's repeated troubles have been damaging. The company's stock price is down more than 30% in 2024, and its reputation was especially tarnished after the door plug blew off a 737 MAX jet back in January. Boeing has since sought to change its culture, with 70,000 Boeing employees having participated in meetings to discuss ways to improve safety.
A federal appeals court has upheld E. Jean Carroll's $5 million civil judgment against President-elect Donald Trump. Trump appealed to the 2023 verdict that found him liable for sexual assault and defamation, arguing the judge should not have allowed jurors to see certain witness testimony and evidence, including the so-called Access Hollywood tape. Today's appeals court ruling found that Trump failed to show the judge made any errors that would warrant a new trial. A spokesperson for Trump says he plans to appeal the ruling in the case, which he called the, quote, Democrat-funded Carroll hoax.
President Biden announced $2.5 billion in additional security assistance for Ukraine today. This comes as the White House pushes to get Ukraine as much aid as possible before President Biden leaves office next month. Now, this latest round includes a $1.25 billion package for Ukrainian military help and a $1.22 billion security package. The U.S. has provided more than $60 billion in aid to Ukraine since Russia invaded the country nearly 3 years ago.
The Texas Department of Public Safety says it is experiencing an outage which is hindering operations at driver license offices across the state. DPS says its driver license offices were closed for the day, and if you had an appointment for this afternoon, staff will work with you to reschedule as soon as possible. And just a heads up now, DPS offices will be closed tomorrow and Wednesday for the New Year holiday.
Well, several Texas laws will kick in after the new year, and one of them gets rid of the requirement for a safety inspection before registering your vehicle. Now, the fee will remain the same, but drivers will save money at the auto shop. Auto mechanics still recommend you get your lights, brakes, and tires checked for your own safety. Last year, state lawmakers eliminated the change to save drivers time and money, but critics worry it will make some of the country's most dangerous roads even more deadly. But not everything is changing. 17 counties will still require a test for your car's emissions before registering your vehicle with the Department of Motor Vehicles, and that does include Travis and Williamson counties.
Cat Metro is doing its part to make sure you celebrate safely this New Year's Eve. It's running rail service later than normal and giving everyone free rides on trains and buses after 5 p.m. tomorrow. Cat Metro says it will extend service tomorrow to help you get in and out of downtown easily for the party at Auditorium Shores. The last train will leave the downtown station around 2:30 Wednesday morning. And keep in mind, Cat Metro will operate a scaled back service on Wednesday.
As the year comes to a close, we continue following the biggest and most impactful stories of the year. The stories that captured your attention, some of them good, some of them hard to take in.
And Nabil Ramadna takes us through the local headlines of 2024.
A lot can happen in a year, and here in Central Texas, 2024 kept us pretty busy. From moments like the total solar eclipse.
It was one of the moments that I will never forget in my lifetime.
Which brought on a Texas-sized party across the hill country. Hundreds of thousands of people positioned themselves to witness the exciting occurrence.
It was weird and really cool. It was also like a little spooky.
Big parties in Austin mean big money. Every year, ACL and South by Southwest draw in large crowds. And don't forget about F1.
We're looking into the billions in terms of economic impact.
And how about the Longhorns joining the SEC and making it all the way to the conference championship? They also still have a shot to win it all.
We decided that we wanted to see the first game of the SEC.
It was a presidential election year, returning Donald Trump to the White House, and we also voted on city council seats and the mayor of Austin, Kirk Watson, winning again.
You know, we now have a contract with our EMS workers, our professionals there, with our firefighters, now with the police. We have a new person managing that.
And we have a new head of police, Chief Lisa Davis, sworn in back in October.
At the end of the day, we have to have strategies that look at crime.
It was also a year that police officers faced trials. Former APD officer Christopher Taylor got a 2-year sentence for deadly conduct in the 2019 police shooting of Maurice De Silva.
Now we're put in a position where you go, you respond within your training, you're potentially looking at prison time.
Officers and DPS troopers clashed with students during protests on UT's campus. As tensions rose in the Middle East between Israel and Hamas in Gaza, students took to the South Lawn to show support for Palestine and Israel. There were dozens of arrests.
We were just confused and didn't understand why we had this kind of response to us, even though we had peaceful intent and there wasn't anything really going on.
The year ended with the loss of former President Jimmy Carter, a life marked by public service and his dedication to building a better future.
We must accommodate changing times, but cling to principles that never change. And I think that's the best philosophy I know in one sentence.
Nabil Ramadna, KXAN News.
It's always so interesting to look back on everything that happened this year. Okay, so in weather, you all had a busy year. You will do a recap later, but today things are pretty
so
nice.
warm.
I know.
Incredibly warm. Yeah, we're still in the 80s in many spots now. It's going to make for a warm evening. And then a cold front arrives and changes all of that for the final day of the year here tomorrow. This is how it looks now at the covert Bee Cave Auto Mall camera there in Bee Cave, Texas, with sunshine here as the sun sets just after 5:32 here this evening. Here is the cold front out ahead of it. Well into the 80s, still 86 in Austin. We've got 90s in Laredo now. Behind the front, 70s and 60s. And that eventually cooler air is going to arrive overnight, setting us up for a much chillier day tomorrow. But we'll still be in the 60s and 70s here at 7 this evening. And then the 50s arrive after midnight as our cold front changes our wind direction from the northwest to the north. Once that north wind hits you, that means that cold front has hit you, and these numbers will drop more suddenly past midnight, and that'll set us up for a morning that begins in the 40s here tomorrow morning. So it's a much cooler start as you're stepping out here on the final day of 2024. Then, despite the north wind, a lot of sun tomorrow will allow the temperatures to recover. 62 here by midday, and then we're in the low to mid 60s for highs here tomorrow afternoon. It actually does get colder as we get into Wednesday morning. This will be the coldest morning of this work week, with low 40s in Austin, but a lot of 30s in the hill country. Although other than a patchy freeze, we don't expect most of us will see a freeze here on Wednesday morning. With this cold front, we're not going to get any extra clouds or any precipitation with it. You can see there's no clouds across the whole state right now, even though a front is there. So this is going to be another one of those dry cold fronts that does bring a wind direction change and a big temperature drop our way. So clear skies and turning colder late tonight, overnight lows of 48. And here's your day tomorrow, the final day of 2024. 65 and sunshine, still a little breezy out of the north, 10 to 15 miles per hour, but we could get up so gusts around 20 to 25. And then we start planning ahead, if you haven't already, for New Year's Eve night. We'll be down around 47 at midnight tomorrow night. And then New Year's Day itself, 60 with sunshine, but there'll be some clouds increasing late in the day. That Wednesday high of 60 should be our coolest high temperature of the work week. We'll start a slow but steady warming trend to wrap up the work week for those of you working this week. 63 Thursday and 65 on Friday. Wednesday will also feature our coldest morning low of 40 in Austin, and then those 30s in the hill country. 47 Thursday morning, 49 on Friday morning. Here's a look at our first warning weather 7-day forecast. More clouds on Thursday. We'll call it a mostly cloudy day. Just a 10% chance of a sprinkle or a little bit of drizzle in the morning. 63. Friday, just a little bit more sun and 65, but back to being dry. Saturday, partly sunny skies and 67, ahead of the warmest day of the next 7 days being Sunday, with highs back in the low 70s. There's a low 20% rain chance here later in the day, but generally speaking, not much in the way of wet weather coming Sunday. Then that next front, Sunday into Monday, likely to bring the coldest air since last winter. Highs on Monday of just 50s, if not some upper 40s, with sunshine and scattered clouds.
All right, Nick, thank you so much. The family of a man shot and killed in Bastrop County earlier this year gathered today to demand justice and announced they have filed a civil lawsuit against the mother of the accused shooter. A 13-year-old boy is accused of shooting and killing Stephen Allen Smith in September. Months later, his family is still mourning and desperate for more answers. Smith's aunt says although the family is still in the throes of grief, their work is just beginning.
We continue to deal with the loss of life, you know, that missing piece that you can't replace. And so for many of us, we are still struggling with that grief. But at the same time, we know that our voices must be raised to ensure that there is justice for Stephen.
In October, the Austin NAACP joined growing calls for thorough investigation into Smith's murder. When KXAN spoke to the Bastrop County District Attorney then, he couldn't go into specifics about the case since the investigation was still active. If you plan on taking a holiday hike or hunting trip in South Texas, the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department is urging you to stay safe by keeping an eye out for animals infected by the New World screwworm. And recently detected in Mexico, the parasites burrow into the skin with sharp mouth hooks. They mainly infect livestock, deer, and other wildlife, but can also affect humans. Some signs to look out for in wildlife include irritated or depressed behavior, loss of appetite, head shaking, the presence of maggots in wounds, and the smell of decaying flesh. The parasite is rearing its head after being declared eradicated in the U.S. in 1966. You can prevent becoming infected by cleaning and covering any wounds you sustain outdoors.
American credit card debt is set to hit record levels in the coming months. According to the National Retail Federation, between November 1st and December 31st, spending is on track to reach between $979 and $989 billion. Other reports found many shoppers dependent on credit cards to manage their holiday purchases. Heading into the peak holiday shopping season, credit card balances were already 8.1% higher compared to last year. And according to another holiday spending report by NerdWallet, 28% of credit card users still hadn't paid off gifts they bought last year. Well, coming up tonight on KXAN at 7 o'clock, it's the Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon's 10th anniversary special, followed by Day of the Jackal at 9 o'clock, before we see you back here for KXAN News at 10.
And always, you can join us an hour earlier for KXAN News at 9 on CW Austin. Here's where to find us.